quickly review what we did. So we basically started saying, okay, you know, if this is our design of the application, at some point we need to put our data into a database, right? So that we can create a cache of what goes on outside, in the outside world. So what we did is we created something called status data. It was a brand new class. It was a POJA, meaning plain old Java object. It doesn't subclass anything, as you can tell right now, right? So what we did in here is we define a whole bunch of constants, right? And some notable ones are database name and table, sorry, database name and version, table name, and then column names, right? And the reason why we did do it like this is just that once you define it as a constant, it's less of a chance of typos because compiler checks for it, right? And Eclipse does self-completion. Then what we did is we created this class called DB helper, right? DB helper is basically responsible for helping with the database creation and upgrade. So typically what's going to happen is you're going to have onCreate method, which gets called only once first time the database is created, right? So typically onCreate is going to run something like create table, blah, blah, blah. So your typical statement is going to be a create table SQL statement, right? When the database changes, like if you notice that there's a change in the database from one version to another, in other words, old version is different than new version, then this one gets called on upgrade, right? So this gets triggered, and typically what you would do in here is you would do alter table. You would say alter table, add columns, blah, 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 right? You would provide for a migration from version 1 to version 2, from 2 to 3, from 3 to 4, and so on to get the user to the latest, right? But in our case, since we're still into development, I just said drop, it should be drop table if exists, and then the table name. And that would just basically erase the table and then recreate it, which is maybe not optimal. You don't want to do that in production because, you know, you're just basically blowing up users' existing data. It may or may not be okay, depends on what kind of data it is, right? So that's what we did with the status data. Then we wrote a little helper method that basically takes the Twitter status, right? Gets writable database, converts the Twitter status to the content values, right? And content values is this data structure that basically maps a Java object, right, on the right-hand side to a table name, a column name, sorry. Right, so status text becomes a column text. So it's just a mapping. It's a name value, it's a cache table, it's a name value pairs. Right? And then we used insert with onConflict because we wanted to ignore the duplicate IDs. And the reason why we wanted to do that is because we said by design we want to use Twitter IDs, and we know that we're going to be getting some duplicates. So that's okay, right? So presumably this could have been here. So that's basically where we were at yesterday with that. Let me just make sure I gave you guys 3. Did I zip it up yesterday? 3A? No, I didn't. Let me just compress and make tarball Yamba 3. That was the yesterday's version. Snapshot. Bam, it's in the shared. Okay. Or it should be in the shared. It is. So so once we had this insert, we then updated our updater service to use it, right? So we simply said get the application, get the status data, because we hung the status data off of the application object, and we basically said insert status. That's it. The line that used to just print it to the log now is actually inserted into the database. And similarly, in the refresh service, what we did is we said, we basically said the status data insert, and we got the status data here. It's the same thing. Yeah. In SQLite, there's no notion of a connection to a database. What do you mean by that? Yes, you're supposed to close your connection. So we did get writable database, right? So if you look at our code here, there is db.close, right? So let me show you. Trying to get this bigger. Okay. So get writable database opens the database, okay, and it creates it if it doesn't exist. Come on. Creates it if it doesn't exist, okay. Once open successfully, it is cached, so you can call this method every time you need to write to a database. Make sure you call it close when you no longer need a database, right? So basically, we just need to at some point, call close on this, okay. But we can call get readable database as many times as we want, and it's only gonna really do something first time around. So it's not gonna be opening it, so on, right? So it's re-enterable. So that's basically what happens in this case for inserting into the database. So so that read write object is valid until the close is called on it. Now there's another one there's a get readable database, which we'll talk about later on as well. So that was
What actually ends up calling or triggering calls to on upgrade?
So what causes calls to on upgrade? So basically, what's gonna happen is if I change the database ID. So let me demonstrate that for you. So if I change this number from 1 to 2, right? So let me put some log here. Log.d tag comma on upgrade from old version to, I can type obviously, to new version. Okay, so I'm just putting some logs so we can actually see what's going on, right? So if I run this, actually I'm gonna filter for logcat status data. Okay. So if I go menu and I say refresh, for example, okay, so see, on upgrade got triggered. It noticed that, hey, we got version 1, we're upgrading to version 2, right? And now that goes to version 2.
So, well, in practice, what causes like if you ship a new version of your app?
So here's the situation. So you may ship, you shipped version 1 of your app with the version of data. So there are 2 versions, right? There's a version of the database and a version of an app. Your app, maybe your first version of app shipped with database version 1, schema version 1, right? Now you're on version 2, version 3 of the app. Schema hasn't changed, right? You've been just adding new, fancy look and feel, this and that. Now you say version 3 of the app or version 5 of the app, you want to change your schema to include, you need the support for, you want to track the location of the tweet, or where the tweet came from. So that requires changing the schema, right?
So SQLite itself will know what the version of the database that has it.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yep. Yeah, so that's basically what happens there. so that now created a new database with that version, right? Even if I change it, let me see, if I change it back to 1, which I shouldn't do, let me see if that's actually going to trigger. I'm curious if that's going to actually trigger the refresh. So the numbers just need to be different. They don't need to be sequential. They don't need to go, 1, 2, or, they could. As a matter of fact, the databases in the system, if you look at their own code, like contacts database is in thousands. So like first 100,000 is like first version of Android. So it goes like that. We're like now maybe I don't know 9,000 version of SQL, right? And then 9,001, 9,002, and so on. So they're just gonna jump in chunks. So let me try this again. So menu, refresh. Ooh, that died. Interesting. So let's see. Can't downgrade database from version 2 to 1. Interesting. I was pretty sure you can. But okay, so I guess the number doesn't need to go up. So that did not do the upgrade. So we're on the current version. Cool. So that's that. Any other questions with respect to what we did yesterday? So now what we want to do is we want to write a we want to do the reading from the database. So if you look at our design, right, the next sort of obvious thing to do, maybe this design, would be to basically do this guy, right? To basically read the data from the database. Make sense? So to do this, we're going to need a new activity. Okay. We're going to call it timeline activity, right? And it's going to have the world's simplest UI, right? It's going to have a title and a big piece of text where we're going to dump the data, right? You guys are going to do this. So let me close everything here. So a little bit of a warm-up repetition from before. So let's do this. Here's the job. So here's the job for you. So create timeline activity.java and timeline.xml layout, right? And basically you're gonna have a layout that's gonna look like this. I'm gonna draw it. So if this is your activity, right, you're gonna have a piece of text here that says timeline or something like that, and then you're gonna have a piece of text here that is gonna be our output. It's gonna be one big piece of text, not editable, just the output, right? That's it. That's basically your job for now. And then wire it so that actually there's a button for that, so you can actually show it, right? Make sense? So I'll let you. You gotta create a couple of files and you gotta create some stuff. So I'll let you play with it a little bit.